Hi, this is Chris Scruggs. I'm here from BMC, and welcome to everyone for joining the Control M21 Overview Seminar today. We're very excited you're here. We will begin the seminar in about 60 seconds as we continue to let people log in. So if you'll bear with us one to 2 minutes, we'll get started. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Control M21 Overview Seminar today. We're really excited to have you here. I'm Chris Scruggs, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm joined by Flora Tramontano-Gutierrez, Joe Goldberg, and Will Lewis. Flora will be sharing with you information about what's new in Control M21. Joe will give you a demo, so you get a chance to see it firsthand. And we are so excited to have Will here to help with the Q&A at the end. I'm sure a lot of you will have questions. With that, I'll go straight to the housekeeping. Regarding questions, you should have a chat panel over on the right-hand side of your board for the GoToWebinar. You can type in any questions at any point in time throughout today's presentation and demo, and we will try to answer as many as we can during the live Q&A. For any Q&A that we miss, we will include in our community's posts that we do post-webinar, or in some cases, we can reach out to you directly to answer your questions if we don't get to it live. In addition to that, you'll see a section that says handouts, and there's 2 handouts that are included today that you can download at any point in time during today's live webcast. One is today's presentation, and the other is the updated Control M Capabilities data sheet. There's numerous resources that we've updated related to this launch or introduced, and at the end of today's session, before we do the Q&A, you'll see there's a slide that you can get from the presentation that has live links to those handouts. With that, we'll get right to it. So Flora, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you everyone for joining us in the launch of Control M21. This is an important day. We are very excited to launch Control M21 and also to share an overview of Control M21 with you. So now, as Chris mentioned, I'm going to give you some highlights of Control M21. I'm going to talk about market challenges on which Control M21 focuses, value and key themes and features. And after my presentation, Joe Goldberg will take you through the key features in a live demo. So there are 3 key market challenges on which Control M21 focuses. The first is about complexity. And you know, this is not a new challenge, but when we talk to you, when we talk to our customers, we understand that this challenge keeps increasing. And the reason why it's so important and increasing is that there is a need or a desire to use the new technologies offered by cloud providers or new open source technologies. And this demand is driven by different teams in an organizations, IT operations or data engineers or cloud architects. And those teams typically expect IT operations to provide, to make those technologies available, or they introduce those technologies by themselves. Either way, they are adding complexity to an already complex technology stack in the organizations. And the challenge here is not only to simplify the complexity, but it is also to exploit this complexity in a way to achieve a competitive advantage. The second important market challenge is accelerate operation, is deliver better results faster, support the business growth with the same assets. And again, this is not new, but it's still very, very important in many organizations. And then we see that there is a growing demand for self-service access to technologies. And this is especially true in organizations that are trying to lower or eliminate the barriers between IT and the business. And there are many organizations that are changing their organizational structure. They are not leveraging on a large IT department anymore, but they have small IT teams very well integrated with the business. And in that cases, the burden cannot be all on IT. Business users need and must access the technologies in a self-service way. And now let's see how Control M responds to those three market challenges. Control M21 responds to the complexity challenge by expanding the orchestration framework, which means by including, absorbing, by natively integrating new technologies. Because doing so, these technologies can be managed through the Control M standard approach, can be part of automated and orchestrated workflows, and this eliminates the complexity of managing those technologies in a separate way. Then Control M21 helps organization to accelerate operations by increasing operational efficiency. You will see that Control M21 delivers a lot of features that make operations easier, faster, and more secure. And finally, Control M21 helps organizations to reduce the barriers between IT and the business by improving self-service and collaboration. This is an important point. Control M21 helps IT operations to provide more freedom to other users. And it's not just about freedom that would turn into chaos, but freedom within the framework of organizational best practices that IT operation can define. So the key message that we associate to Control M21 is the following. IT operation can strengthen their orchestration framework for business growth through expansion and efficiency, and provide business users the freedom of a secure self-service experience within IT framework. Or if you want, the short message is Control M21 provides freedom within an expanded and more efficient framework. Now, for each major Control M21 team, I want to go one level down and mention the features that support these teams. So let's get started with the expansion of the orchestration framework. As I mentioned, expansion is all about integration. It's all about integrating new technologies into the orchestration framework so you can better orchestrate modern workflows across hybrid environments. Now, which are the key features in this area? First of all, I want to mention the Airflow integration, and you will see this feature in action in the demo from Joe in a while. I guess many of you are familiar with the Airflow. In any case, it's a popular open source platform used to automate data pipelines. And by integrating Airflow, Control M21 allows IT operations or developers or data engineers to connect their Airflow-based data pipelines in a wider orchestration framework, including other applications, for example, SAP or Oracle, and also allows them to leverage the advanced orchestration capabilities of Control-M while they integrate Airflow data pipeline. Then we have new cloud integration and the support for a new authentication cloud method. And with this, Control M21 allows IT operations and MFT engineers to transfer file to, from, and within cloud repositories of their choice. So they have more freedom to use cloud repositories that they prefer. And in fact, Control M21 integrates with new AWS, Azure, and Google cloud storage services. In addition, Control M21 supports a new authentication method, this AWS AM roles, which is the preferred authentication method for many customers, but it also simplifies the access to AWS plugins because it allows to decouple Control M definitions from security specifications. And then finally, I want to mention this continuous monthly releases. And this topic does not strictly relate to Control M21 because this is an ongoing activity. But I want to mention this in this context of integration because this is a project, an R&D project that allows to deliver new integrations every month and allows to expand the orchestration framework in a continuous way. Let's move to the second theme. So how Control M helps increase the operational efficiency? It does so through three key buckets of features that we have categorized into operational enhancements, new file transfer capabilities, and administration facilities. Operational enhancements include all those features that allow operations to be made easier, faster, and more securely. I wanted to mention a few features. Control M21 support a new access method, the Identity Provider SAML 2.0, and this method enhances the security with a single sign-on and the multi-factor authentication, and also facilitates the management of users and roles. And then IT operations can define their workflows faster with a number of features. I want to mention a couple. They have the possibility to reference existing folders when defining new jobs or subfolders, and they can use variables in post-processing actions. Second bucket, there are a lot of enhancements on top of the managed file transfer and managed file transfer enterprise components that really elevate those components to a level where they are more integrated, more efficient, more secure. They provide enhanced customer experience, more collaboration, and freedom. I want to mention a few key features here. There is a new web interface for MFT internal users to interactively transfer files, as opposite to creating an MFT job and creating a connection profiles or download file transfer tools. Administrators have a new level of security to block or allow the access to list of users to the file transfer server. There is an enhanced file exchange interface, and also you have the possibility to automate the onboarding of external partners involved with the transfer of external files. Administration facility include all those features that reduce the deployment and configuration effort. For example, there is a new centralized connection profile for SAP job, in addition to all the centralized connection profile introduced by Control M20 version. And there is an interesting and important utility to automate the conversion from local to central connection profiles that reduces the, the conversion risk and errors. Let's move to the last theme, improve self-service and collaboration. And this theme is supported by really a lot of features. I already mentioned that with Control M21, all the users, IT operations, data and cloud engineers, MFT engineers have more freedom to use the technologies of their choice. And also developers have the freedom to use languages of their choice when they embed scripting in Control M jobs. But freedom also means that users are provided with Control M data and capabilities through interfaces they are familiar with. And so business users are provided with enhanced user experience through the graphical web client, which includes many additional features with Control M21. And developers and engineers are provided with enhanced user experience through the automation API, which again includes new capabilities with Control M21 and is also updated with monthly releases of new capabilities. And I want to mention a couple of new automation API, in particular the one that allows to deploy job and subfolders as opposite to just folders, that allows developers to deploy their changes faster, and the capability to import and export entire workflows in JSON. And with that, I'm going to give the word over to Joe for the live demo. Joe, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Flora. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So repeat that. As I'm beginning to set myself up, just a couple of words about the demo that we're going to walk through. First of all, this is only going to be really a subset of of what we're going to be seeing. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure. Can someone confirm that you are seeing my screen?
Yes, we are seeing your screen. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that confirmation, but I have, in my previous attempts, sometimes given entire demos and somebody finally said, "Are you sharing something?" So what we're going to see is just a subset of some of the capabilities that Flora mentioned. Of course, this is just a time factor. If you'd like to delve into this more deeply, we certainly will have the ability to do that over time and schedule that as necessary. What we've been hearing, and one of the things that I want to focus on in this particular scenario, is a situation whereby, as Flora mentioned, there are a variety of teams, development teams, groups within the organization that require greater access or desire greater access to Control M and require orchestration. They may be using their own tools, and the demo that we're going to look at consists of using Airflow together with Control M. And they need to still access a lot of the traditional processes, making sure that upstream or downstream dependencies that their particular work has with the rest of the organization are still going to be managed in a seamless manner. And so the scenario we have here is an organization that operates their financial applications using SAP. Specifically, let's say order to cash, which is a bunch of SAP jobs. At the end or somewhere during that process, one of the products of that application is a bunch of data that is required for analytics that are going to be run on how to maybe improve some of the logistics of the organization. And so what we see here in front of us is a workflow that would be constructed to implement this kind of a scenario. We start off with an SAP job. This is the job that represents that traditional application and the creation of the data that is then required to be pushed and consumed by the analytics application downstream. That particular application may run in an on-prem environment or in a particular cloud, and the data has to move from that location to perhaps a different cloud storage for consumption or ingestion by the data application, the analytics application that is run downstream. So what we have in this flow is an SAP job followed by a series of data movement to file transfer jobs that move data to where the analytics application requires it. Running an Airflow DAG. For those of you not familiar with Airflow or its terminology, DAG is really their term for a folder or a collection of tasks, as we'll see momentarily. And then we have an SLA job at the end. So one of the things we want to start with is looking at how we now can build this entire flow. And of course, you start this kind of an application with connection profiles. So let's move to the configuration domain and look at our connection profiles. If we look at the Airflow, well, you know what, let's work in sequence. Let's start with SAP. As Flora mentioned, you can see that I am in the domain looking at centralized connection profiles. We now have the ability to create centralized profiles for SAP. Lots of customers have many instances of SAP, both for specific applications as well as dev test. And so the ability to minimize and more effectively manage the centralized or connection profiles for SAP is a major benefit. I apologize for any noise you may hear in the background. There's some work going on just outside of my door. But as you can see here, this is a centralized connection profile. And as Flora mentioned, there is now a provided Python script that will convert local to centralized connection profiles, making this transition quite simple and seamless. We then would have a variety of data movement to file transfer operations. So one of them is moving from S3, which is AWS block storage in the AWS environment. And you can see what we specified here, that it is S3. And I just want to highlight here, this is a feature that has been available for a while, that Flora, I think, also highlighted, which is the fact that when integrating really with any kind of services, but particularly with cloud services, the general preferred method among security teams is not to have control M or not to have applications that integrate or interact with cloud services having to manage credentials. This is generally implemented in each cloud in a very similar way, but they have different terms for it. In the AWS environment, this is generally known as IAM roles, IAM standing for Identity and Access Management. And you can assign a role sometimes to a service, sometimes to a virtual machine or an EC2 instance. And in our case, our MFT is installed on such an instance, and we are using IAM roles associated with that EC2 instance. As you can see here, just to highlight this, the credentials information that I have specified are not valid. They're bogus information, because I am using an IAM role associated with the agent that's running on, or with the EC2 instance on which the MFT agent is running on. Another cloud storage definition that we have here, a connection profile, is for Azure. And Azure Blob Storage has been, support was added in Control M20 Fixpack 200. And in Control M21, that capability is extended to include a flavor of Azure Blob Storage called Data Lake Storage Gen 2, which is their latest generation. And you can see in this selection that you can choose either conventional Azure Blob Storage or this new flavor of Azure Data Lake Storage, which implements on top of Blob Storage a hierarchical kind of a file system. Lastly, let's take a look at airflow. And in Control M21, we are providing support initially, and this will be extended, for standalone airflow servers and for Google Composer, which is a managed service, if you will, provided by Google for airflow. So the underlying technology for Google Composer is also airflow. The interaction between the two from a functional perspective is identical, but how you actually connect to them is a little bit different. And so just want to make sure that you see that we provide support for those two. What we're doing here is quite simple. We're just specifying a host name or an instance of where the airflow server is hosted, along with some additional information that enables Control-M to connect to that airflow instance, and we'll see how that appears. Okay, so if we now go back and say we've prepared our connection profiles, that's something that you do either, well, possibly just as little as once, but certainly on occasion, and then you use those connection profiles in the jobs that you create on a regular basis. So I've created the jobs in advance to save us some time, but we can take a look at some of the characteristics. I mean, SAP here, really, the SAP job is no different as it has been or compared to previous versions of SAP, of Control-M and SAP support. It's the connection profile that has really changed significantly. So what would happen is if you were to then look for connection profiles, you would be able to see that as opposed to before, where you had only local ones, you also now have centralized connection profiles available. I'm not going to bother selecting that. I'm not actually going to submit this workspace. I'm going to just run what I predefined before. Then I can look at my MFT, which in this case is transferring, let's say, the SAP application created some data in the S3 environment, rather, which is on AWS, but I'm running my analytics on Azure, for example, or of course vice versa, or maybe GCP or some other environment. And you can see the two connection profiles. So I'm moving data from AWS to Azure in this instance, and there's a couple of other MFT jobs that are running to move some additional data. And then the last job of interest here is airflow. And so you can see here the definition for an airflow job is, of course, identical to all other Control-M jobs, except for the what section. We've already looked at the connection profile, so this is information that enables Control-M to connect and communicate with airflow. That communication, of course, is required to run the workflow, but is also available during the construction of a job. So once I have a connection profile, I can, during my planning phase, reach out to my airflow environment and retrieve the DAGs. And again, a DAG is considered as like a folder, the DAGs in that airflow environment. I can select the one I want, and then that gets populated. If there's any parameters that I need to pass, I can pass them as well. Airflow has a parameter kind of operation called XCOM. That's supported here as well. And the last piece of information that we could choose for our airflow job is how we should handle, how Control-M should handle airflow logs. Now, of course, if there are errors or if there's any information of interest while jobs are running, you want to be able to look at the logs, but you also may wish to perform actions or post-processing in Control-M, and you can do that if you then copy the logs from airflow into the Control-M output, and then all of the actions available in Control-M become available for you to perform on the basis of airflow information. Additionally, if you are archiving, so if you have, let's say, workload archiving, or however you choose to archive Control-M output, and you want to keep it from, for either analysis and problem resolution or for audit purposes, you have the ability to do that once you copy the logs into the Control-M output. If you don't need the Control-M output, you'll see momentarily when we get into execution, you still can access the logs in real time. But of course, if you haven't copied them into the Control-M environment, then the persistence of that data will be dependent on and only available in your airflow environment, not in Control M. Okay. So again, I've made some changes here. I don't really want to save those. So let's pop over to the monitoring domain and let's run this set of jobs that I've prepared in advance. And so let me do a run. And then we'll take a look at the folders that are running. Okay. So here's our flow. We can see the SAP job has started. Again, everything as far as these new job types behaves exactly the same as they do for any other Control M jobs. Oh, we see that we have an error. And you can imagine this is an error that was intentional so that we can demonstrate some other things. Now, these three jobs here are file transfer jobs. And typically when the file transfer happens to fail, then there's a variety of ways that it's kind of handled. But in a situation, we want to give as much capability and sort of self-service to development teams or application teams. We want them to be able to control and correct this problem on their own. If there's in this case, let's take a look at what the problem is. We'll probably find that it's a missing file or an invalid file or something has gone wrong. Now, of course, being the application team, I need to provide that data. I might have to log into a server somewhere to either upload the correct data or rename files or do something else. I might have to then contact operations or log some kind of an incident or respond to an incident to say that I've corrected the problem. What we want to be able to do here is to enable this to be simply handled by the team that owns this particular application. And one of the things that has been provided to make that easier is the ability to actually log into or connect or perform file transfers using a new user interface available that communicates directly with the file transfer servers in your environment. And so let me log in. So let's assume I am the application owner. The file that should have been there is not there for some reason, or there's maybe perhaps been an error in the job that the wrong file name was specified. Whatever the case is, I need to provide a file. And now I can do that with this UI. So I'm going to pick a random job or a random file. Of course, it doesn't really matter in our particular situation, but I can upload it. It will now interactively perform the file transfer in effect that job was going to perform. Or possibly it provides the input. And so now I have a variety of different ways that I can resolve this problem. If I have the authority, I can maybe rerun the job. If I don't have the authority, maybe I have the authority to just approve it or set it as okay. And I could do that graphically directly from the user interface. However, just to show you another option that is available, if I have the authority to do this, I can take a look at, and perhaps I've gotten an email telling me what job has failed. And in this case, you can see there's a run ID of, which is the order ID of J1. And if I have authority or I am familiar with Automation API, I can issue the equivalent of setting a job to being okay using Automation API. And so I'm going to do that. And what we should see is once that job has been set to okay, I can get rid of this. But if we refresh our view, we see that that job has been set to okay. The rest of the stream has now run. Now, in our scenario, really what we wanted to get to was this airflow job. So let's take a look at what this job consists of and what the details that are available to us and what actions that we can take. So if we look at the Airflow tab, and by the way, if you're not familiar with the web UI, there is an application tab for every job type. So if I have job types for cloud services or file transfer. Perhaps you noticed when I was looking at that, it wasn't the point of interest, so I didn't highlight it. But there is an application tab for every job type. And here with Airflow, you can see we have that detail. Now, as I mentioned, the DAG is a collection of tasks, and this is the list of those tasks within this particular DAG that I chose to execute. You can see the status. This is Airflow information, so this would be the status that we get from Airflow. And if I select one of these tasks, if you recall, we talked about how to handle Airflow logs, so you can copy Airflow logs into Control-M output, in which case you would actually be able to see it in the output tab. But if you chose not to do that for whatever reason, you can still dynamically, in real time, retrieve Airflow logs from the Airflow environment. And this is what this log looks like. Now, again, if I wanted to perhaps set some kind of a post-processing action and look for a string here or something like that, I could request that Control-M copy the log into the output, and then I would be able to define a conventional action for on output statement to perform the action or actions that I need to perform. Additionally, if you wish to view this in an Airflow UI, if you are either an Airflow user and you're familiar with it, if you're not familiar with it and you want to get familiar with it, for whatever reason, you have the ability to actually log into or connect to the Airflow UI directly from Control-M. Control-M has the information that is available in the connection profile. We are able to connect as a user would log in, and this is the view of that DAG that we had before. In fact, if I pull this out and show this to you side by side, whoops, you might be able to see, let me just rearrange this a little bit. Yeah, you can see what Airflow is showing us and what we see in Control-M. There's one other function I mentioned, but in this particular DAG, there is nothing called XCOM. XCOM is kind of like variables in Control-M, where you have the ability to pass information from or among tasks. And if you had any of that in your particular DAG, you would be able to see that from this UI as well. So what you can see here, and again, this is just a very small sort of subset of some of the capabilities that Flora was talking about, that if you have a team that is using Airflow, that is interested in Airflow, maybe managing their work there, but they have some dependencies either upstream or downstream with other applications in your environment, you have now the ability to really get a seamless view. And of course, once you plug Airflow jobs into your Control-M environment, all of the capabilities available with Control-M become available for managing and monitoring those Airflow workloads as well. So, I have here an SLA job at the end. If I were to look at a service, I would now be able to have intelligent SLA management, notification about anything running slowly. If I have business users that need to get a view of this entire analytics application holistically from a server's perspective, they would be able to do that. So all of the capabilities that you're either familiar with or using with Control-M and become available and can be leveraged for Airflow as well. One last thing that I'd like to just demonstrate that our provider or capabilities provided. Let me get rid of this and start from scratch because I think I made some errors in this that are provided for simplifying how developers or folks outside of IT can interact with Control-M is the ability to import and export job definitions that you see graphically into JSON or the other way around. So let's assume this was an existing flow, and now I have an engineering team that wants to either modify it or use it for whatever other purpose, and they happen to like using JSON and automation API. They have the ability, or you have the ability to export this and let them see the JSON. And so this is what the JSON looks like when you export it, okay? And of course, they can now either modify it or perhaps they can build this from scratch or use this as a template to build other applications and other flows And then you have the ability to import from JSON directly. Now, you have had the ability to import and export in effect using Automation API, but this makes the whole process of using the graphical interface when it makes sense by whoever wants to use it much more seamless, and to go back and forth and in exchange between an as code approach as opposed to taking a graphical approach. And so I can also just as easily, I might as well show you this, which is import that same JSON from however it happened to have been constructed back into the UI, and you can see that I will get really another instance of exactly the same flow. I can then use find and update if necessary, or any other processes that I'm familiar with. A couple of other things I'd like to touch on before I finish with the demo, and that is we talk about this notion of freedom and framework, which really are slightly like kind of contradictory things when you think about it. That you on the one hand, you want to have freedom, but you want to have some controls. And that's kind of the tension that you're trying to achieve. In Control M21, one of the capabilities that has been added that really significantly extends this notion of a framework is site standard capabilities. Now, up until Control M21, you could define a site standard and you would apply to a folder. In fact, if I go back to my planning for a moment and look at my folder here, if you were to look at the folder, you can see that it has a site standard applied. In order for a standard to be applied, you have to select it, and either voluntarily or there are mechanisms to force you to choose one. But you got, up until 21, you got a single site standard that will apply to your folder. This made the management of site standards a little bit cumbersome because everything had to be contained within that particular standard. If you had a pretty common standard across the organization, but there were some differences from group to group, you would probably replicate standards, and so you would have many of them. What has been added with Control M21 is the notion of policies. You can now build standards and apply them with a policy. And the policy really is just a way to name a particular standard, but also to provide filters to specify which folders or which sort of components in your environment or subset of your environments based on servers and or folders this policy would apply to. And so now you have a way to have multiple, and in this case you can see I have 3 different policies, all of them are active. So I have a policy for the general section of a job definition, like things like job name and what you're executing, descriptions, and so forth. I have a policy for the prerequisite section, for the scheduling section. And you can break these down so that things that are common and that apply all, perhaps for all or most of your jobs, you can specify very easily via a policy. Those things that might be very specific to a group, you can specify still in group-specific policies, which now could be much, much smaller. So in this situation, the scenario that I chose, we're specifying, or we have a structure whereby we have different business units, and within business units we have different application teams, and each application team, perhaps not necessarily realistic, works on a single application. So we specify in our site standard all of the things that are specific to that particular team or unit, and everything else is specified in policies, and you can see the relationship between site standard and policy. And when they apply, you have this kind of layering effect that greatly simplifies the entire process. One last thing I just want to touch on, we showed you, or I showed you this file transfer capability, but you want to be able to control that as well. You don't want just anyone to be able to enter into or perform file transfers in this kind of a mechanism. And so here too, you can actually configure what we call the allowed and blocked users. So if you were to look at the file transfer server, for example, this is the one I have here. If I look at configuration, I can choose to specify which users I want to allow and which I don't in the authentication details. And if I then, let's say, block, I happen in this this is a very new small demo environment, I have only a single user. If I block that user that I used before, even though I was able to log in before, now I won't be able to. And of course, if I allow it again, it will be. And that gives us the ability to control who has access to this facility. That makes it significantly easier for users to do data movement, but again, within the framework of the organization to make sure that they do the right thing for themselves and for other users. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back to our moderator, and I think we'll have some Q&A.
Fantastic, Joe. Thank you so much. And I'm turning this back to Flora's slides. So we will start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Thank you again, Flora and Joe. Really appreciate that. At this time, I'd like to invite, and here they come. Oh, Joe and Flora and Will to turn on their cameras. You can see their faces, and we will start the Q&A. If you have questions, please keep them in. We have had many questions come in, which is wonderful. We probably will not be able to get to all of them, but we will follow up. And as many of you know, if you've participated in our virtual control and seminar series, we do blog posts after the seminars where we answer many of these questions as well. So with that, I will start with, let's see, let's go to Will Lewis. So Will, the question is, will this be an in-place upgrade for Control-M? It says 9.0.xx versions.
Yeah, I think in looking at that question, I think the question is, from which versions can we leverage the in-place upgrade process to get to version 21? And the answer to that is anything from version 19 forward is supported for that in-place upgrade process.
Fantastic, thank you. And then one more question while we've got you. Joe, it says there was a hope for some news about a Control-M agent usage within containers.
Yeah, the containerization of the agent is something that is on our, I would say, our priority list. It did not make the the V21 cut, although that is something we're actively working on. We are hopeful at this point to have this at some point between the V21 and the V22 release.
Perfect. Okay, Joe, turning to you. We have a question that came in, and the person is asking, do we still need to purchase self-service to use the Control-M web to see planning and monitoring domains, or does that functionality come with the base of 9.0.21?
So I think I'm probably going to need Will to chime in, but I think that this is more of a contractual or licensing issue, depending on what kind of license you have. But certainly, I think the majority of licenses that have occurred in the last several versions of Control-M have included self-service. So again, I'll defer to Will, but hopefully that's somewhere in the right ballpark.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, Joe. I mean, we have very few customers at this point that have a license that restricts their usage of self-service or for the web interface. So for the most part, customers that are on Control-M platform, for example, that is a automatic entitlement.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Flora, a question for you. Do I have to change my site standards to use policies?
Oh, thank you. Good question. So the answer is no, you don't need to, but you may want to use site standard policies because they really allow you to manage site standards more effectively. And allows you to reduce your site standard definitions. There's one thing you need to take care about, that is if you define site standard policies associated to folder that have site standard already defined, you probably have to make some changes to keep the logic consistent.
Okay, thank you. And Joe, I think this is still related to site standards for you, related to what Flora was talking about. Can we deploy the only changed, I think it was really only the change job from that folder through Automation API?
So that, I don't think, that's not a site standard issue, I don't think. But yes, so in Control M21, with, and again, Automation API is another one of those components that has a life that's a little bit separate from Control M. There are monthly releases, and this support, I think, came a little bit earlier than Control M21, but it's kind of around the 21 capability. The ability to, to deploy subsets of jobs or subsets of folders rather than having to do entire folders. So yes, that is a capability that has been, that's provided in Control M21. As far as the specific version of Automation API, it's a 21 dot something, but I'm not sure exactly which one. If you've been looking at Automation API, it's the nomenclature or the release structure has gone to 21, I think a month or maybe 2 months ago already. So that's why I'm not sure of exactly which flavor. Let me check that, and we'll make sure to publish that in our responses to other questions.
Okay, great. All right. Will, what is, and this may be a Joe question too, but I'll start with Will. What is the maximum number of jobs self-service web interface can load in a single workspace? Is there a limitation for that in version 20?
Yeah, I think the limitation is somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000. That's pretty much consistent with what we had in version 20. There is a system parameter that will allow you to increase that, however.
Okay, perfect. We can follow up with the person that asked that question. We can follow up. I'll make a note. And then, oh goodness, we have so many great questions coming in. Okay, Will, another one for you. Does the local desktop client still exist in 9.0.21?
It does still exist in 21. I think there's a couple of questions around the desktop client and sort of our plans for transitioning to the web interface. That is something that, you know, at some point in the future we do plan to deprecate. I mean, we're seeing more and more of our users and our customers moving to the web interface. It's just a lot easier from an admin perspective. There's a number of different reasons. But the desktop client will remain in place until we have, and we're very confident that we've achieved true feature parity between the two.
Okay, thank you. All right. Here's another one for, I think, Will. After upgrading to version 21, is log4 remediation still needed?
Yeah, so the log4j stuff is, it should, for the most part, all be covered in version 21. But I don't want to speak too definitively on that. I think that's something we probably need to follow up because I think there are a couple of caveats around that.
Okay. Here's one related to integrations. I'll go to Joe for this. Are there any plans to have out-of-the-box integration with Okta to log on to Control M? That may be a Will question as well, but.
So Flora mentioned in her discussion that we have support for SAML 2.0 coming in Control M21. That support is to provide support for integration with identity providers that comply with or support SAML 2.0, and Okta is one of those. So yeah, that's going to be in Control M21. yeah, if we, I think what well, also in the responses that we published, I'll try to remember to put in some, excuse me, a couple of screenshots to show you exactly what that looks like, where you can find it, but it is available to configure in the Control-M 21 environment.
Perfect. Flora, I have a question for you. It says, Flora mentioned, so something that you mentioned, there's a local to centralized conversion utility. Where can I find it?
Oh, yes, that's a utility that can be found in the Automation API download director. That's the place where it is. And it's a Python scripting. You can find all the instructions. They are documented very well to use that utility and convert from local to centralized connection profiles.
Fantastic. Okay, we are getting close to the end of the webinar. Let's see, I'll ask one more question from this. Thank you all so much for all the questions. We will be sharing the recording for this in an email that will go out tomorrow. So anything, if you missed anything or if you want to share this with colleagues, there will be an email. Look for that and the recording will be in there. You all will also receive an email with the recording. And again, don't forget to download the presentation and the capabilities data sheet from the handout section. Last question. I will give this one to, let's see, Will. I'll send this one to you. Can viewpoints be imported from the current version of 20 client to the web view on version 21?
Oh, you had to ask me one that I don't have an answer to.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we can definitely follow up
maybe
on
Joe
that.
knows the answer to that one.
Okay.
I don't know the answer, no.
All right.
Yeah, we can
Good follow-up.
For responses.
Yeah, thank you. You all have put in many awesome questions, and we will get to all of those. There is one last question for Will. It has been asked several times, and it is really about when will version 21 be available in the EPD?
All right, that's a question I can answer. At this point the plan is to go GA with version 21 on September 30, which means it will be available for download on EPD on that day.
Fantastic. Okay, and with that, you can see on your screen there's a number of resources that you can access. In addition to that, I want to make sure everyone is aware of our upcoming event in October for the Exchange. This is a free 2-day event. There are several sessions related to not only version 21, MFT, Helix Control-M, the cloud integrations, a number of cloud integrations that we have. So lots and lots of activity, great sessions, great panelists and presenters for the keynotes. So I urge and encourage all of you to please register for this event and attend. And there'll be lots of experts there. You can ask even more questions. Again, we'll take these questions. We'll respond to some of you directly. Others will definitely alert all of you when the community post is loaded with all of the answers for today's Q&A. And given how many there are, it'll probably be a series, which we've done in the past. So with that, thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Joe and Flora, for all of the Q&A and for sharing all the information on Control-M 21. And to everyone out there, please have a wonderful day and a wonderful afternoon or a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. This ends today's webinar.